Welcome to Sparky on Ice, the coldest podcast on the internet. Today is August 26th, and I have been on ice for 122 days. Welcome back, everybody. It has not been an interesting week here. The plane has still not arrived, and people are starting to get kind of grumpy. We had several decent days which they could have shown up, but they didn't. Something about weather windows and takeoff, so which is kind of good because when they would have shown up, it could have run them into some bad weather that showed up on those days. So I guess it's good they didn't come in. But yeah, I really want my mail, and these people really want to get out of here, and there's people sitting in Christchurch that really want to show up. So hopefully we'll get a plane in sometime this week. But that seems kind of unlikely soon, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So Saturday was one of the days they were supposed to come in, and there was going to be a day landing, which would have been just fine, except for we had some serious weather moving that day, and it moved in really early and really hard. In fact, our fleet ops guys, the heavy equipment operators, were on their way out to the airfield to clean up the runway and get it all ready for the plane. And then right about 9 o'clock in the morning, this major snow system with a lot of wind moved in there, and it took us to Con 1 for a bit. So that made for a very interesting day. The fleet ops guys were on their way out, and because it got so bad they couldn't see, they turned around and drove back. But because they couldn't see, they had to rely on GPS all the way back. They were moving about 6 miles an hour in a caravan, and you could hear them over the radio calling out, this one's moving, this one's moving, this was moving. They moved like a train so that no one got lost, because a couple of guys, their GPS wasn't working right, so they had to make sure everybody made it back. It took them about an hour, but they did make it back, so that's really good. Those guys are really good at driving those vehicles, so I like that. I'm still doing dewinterizations when I can get out. It's been one of those weeks where it's just been windy and snowy, and snow's been blowing around. It's just hard to get in and out, and you just do what you can when those situations come up. There's only so much we can do. Yeah, dewinterization is, we're bringing the buildings back up to be used for the summer, because we shut all the power down during the winter so we don't waste fuel and electricity trying to keep them warm, because if nobody's going to be in them, it doesn't make sense to keep them warm. And I agree, so that's part of what we do. So I have to take all the notes, and we're making a new SOP for that, so that next year it'll be easier. It's not that it's hard, it's nice to take a list around with you instead of trying to guess at what's going on, which is what I'm doing this year. What else happened? Yeah, I went to karaoke again Friday night. We had our no-fly karaoke night, which was fun. It was some people's third going away karaoke, so it's getting worse and worse. They're on their third farewell tours or whatever. I did Under the Bridge by Chili Peppers, and was told it was one of my best performances so far, so that's very good. I also did Come As You Are by Nirvana, and a duet of 500 Miles by the Proclaimers with a friend. Those went pretty well. Apparently not as good as Under the Bridge. So I'll probably do that one again, and might make that one my regular till I get it really, really good. But as with any sort of event at a bar, there are always some jokers. We had two of them, our two regular class clowns, I guess you could say. They tend to drink a bunch, but they are so much fun. It's not that they get super drunk, they just are a lot of fun when they start drinking. And they came up, and every karaoke they dared to do some silly song. Last time it was Old MacDonald, and this time someone had them do Weather Girls, It's Raining Men, and that was fun, because I don't think they knew all the words, and they certainly didn't know all the timings of it, but yeah, it was just a good time, and everybody enjoyed that. But the real showstopper for me on this was one of the guys who rarely shows up for karaoke, and I didn't even know he could sing, but he's apparently really good. He did Cowboys from Hell from Pantera. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Pantera, but damn, was he good. I mean, like, really, really good. And some of the guys in the audience got up and started a mosh pit over by the stage and made it hilarious seeing these guys over there mosh pitting, including two of the two drunk guys. So, yeah. I really didn't expect that guy to be that good. He did another song that I can't remember what it was, but I was like, man, he can sing. It's amazing. It's just this guy you just don't expect to be able to sing, and he can. On another note, a low settled over the Ross Sea today and stalled, giving us some pretty nasty weather. It even went Con 1 for like an hour and a half today, which is the longest Con 1 we've been in. And we've been on the edge of Con 1, Con 2 for almost the entire day. Wind knocked down one of the power lines feeding some of the outlying buildings, and the lineman had to go up in those conditions in the bucket truck. It's pretty dangerous. I watched him do some of it, and man, that bucket truck was moving. I did get called out this afternoon for some heat trace, so I figured while I was out, I'd make a quick video, and I did. So it's got a little bit showing the buildings and the lack of visibility that we have, so that you can see, what a Con 1, Con 2, or high Con 2, Con 1 looks like. It's not as Con 1 as it was earlier in the day, but you can definitely tell the visibility is pretty low. I also put in a time lapse that I made a little later of the down by the power plant and the sign. So I got two views on there. One's through my new telephoto lens for my phone, and the other was just with the phone. Not the greatest shots, but you get an idea of what the wind is doing through those. And another thing I'm about to start is a D&D group. I've been wanting to play for a long time, and I heard several of the folks coming in on Main Body will be doing some gaming. So I'm hoping to either start my own or join one of theirs. But for now, I'm going to run some solo adventures so I can relearn the mechanics of the game and be ready to go when they get here. I haven't played seriously played in 25 years or so. So they're on 5th edition now, and I stopped playing on 2nd edition. So it's been a long, long time. Other than that, it's been a pretty quiet week. No major emergencies, and pretty much business as usual here, if you can call this place usual. So with that, let's jump into some history. The Nimrod expedition of 1907 and 1909, otherwise known as the British Antarctic Expedition, was the first of 3 expeditions to the Antarctic led by Ernest Shackleton. Its main target among the range of geographical and scientific objectives was to be the first to the South Pole. They did not make it. This is a pretty big expedition with a lot going on, so there's a lot of other information out there that I did not cover, but I suggest you look this one up if you really want to learn about it. There's a ton out there on it, as it being one of the big, and he's one of the, I guess the biggest. Him, Scott, Adamson, and a few others were considered the big heroes of the Antarctic heroic expeditions. And so let's get into that history. The aim of Shackleton's expedition in the Nimrod was to make successful journey to the South Pole. Shackleton went to Norway to search for a ship and purchased the Nimrod, an old Scottish sealer which had been used in Newfoundland. The cost was £5,000, and refit cost another £7,000. Captain was to be Rupert England, and the first mate was John King Davis. They sailed in 1907, thanks to a lot of private sponsors, bank loans, and a large number of creditors. While in Australia, Professor Mawson, who Mawson Station is named after, joined the expedition. The Australian government gave a grant of £5,000 more, and New Zealand gave £1,000, so that the Nimrod was expected to do some oceanographic work between Australia and Antarctica. Shackleton left the port of Lyttelton, New Zealand, and she was so fully loaded with supplies that it couldn't carry enough coal to do the work in Antarctica. So the New Zealand government provided a tramp steamer which towed Nimrod to the Antarctic Circle. They carried 2 men with them, recommended to Shackleton by William Bruce. It was James Murray from Glasgow and a second surgeon, Alistair Forbes Mackay. Shackleton, in a written statement, promised Scott that he would not go to the McMurdo Sound area, which Scott felt was his. Shackleton headed for the Barrier Inlet, but found the edge of the barrier had changed. He did think of landing in an area he called the Bay of Whales, that is, Bay of Whales as in the animal, not the place, which was another indentation in the barrier. He had hoped to land there, but the pack ice kept them from landing properly, and Shackleton thought the barrier was unstable. Against his promise, he headed for McMurdo Sound, and 16 miles of pack ice prevented the Nimrod from reaching Hut Point, which was in contact with the ice barrier. So they set up a base on Cape Royds. Before the winter set in at Shackleton's base, a party of 6 set out to climb Mount Erebus, almost as high as the Matterhorn in Europe. They set out with improvised rucksacks, crampons, and made out of leather and nails. Despite the poor equipment and clothing, they survived the 36-hour blizzard at 10,000 feet. The summit was eventually reached, and the altitude measured was 13,500 feet using a hypsometer, which is an interesting piece of equipment because you boil water and you determine what temperature the water boils at, and that gives you your altitude because water boils at lower temperatures at higher altitudes. It's a very interesting piece of equipment. Interesting thing is this was the first ascent of Mount Erebus and the first ascent of any peak in Antarctica. And the summit included a party with Mawson and Mackay. Shackleton had with him some dogs, 12 Siberian ponies, and an Errol Johnson car provided by Beardmore. This was a 4-cylinder, 15-horsepower open-cab car, and it did not fare well in the conditions. The wheels wouldn't go well in the snow, constantly got stuck, and it kept overheating, causing them to have to sit and wait for it to cool down. I know it seems odd that a car would overheat in Antarctica, but the way that they were designed, everything would freeze and not do its job cooling, even though it was air-cooled. Over the winter, 4 ponies died. Shackleton had not taken a farrier to look after them, and they had to make walks daily over the volcanic ash to keep their feet trim. Before the southern party left, the men hauled sleds to Hut Point without using skis, dogs, or ponies. So that's like 16 miles pulling the sleds. It's, by man. So they're very frustrating. However, the ponies were not a great success. Shackleton thought they were a good idea after their success in the Jackson-Harmsworth expedition of the Antarctic islands. They required more attention than the dogs, were much heavier, and more liable to fall through snow bridges into crevasses. They were also plant eaters, and their food had to be carried with them, as a dog could eat fresh seal when they killed them. If a pony fell into a crevasse, it was almost impossible to pull out. The party made good time. At first, on the journey across the Great Ice Barrier, they took 29 days to cover the distance that Scott's party had traveled in 59. At 81 degrees south, the first pony had to be killed, followed on November 28th by a second, and then December 2nd by a third. On December 7th, a 4th pony fell into the crevasse so deep it could not be recovered, not even for its meat. On December 16th, they reached 85 degrees south. After Christmas Day, they attained the attainment of the South Pole was beginning to look remote as food supplies began to dwindle. The party was now on reduced rations, and their body temperatures were 2 degrees below normal. The party was suffering from dehydration, since there wasn't enough fuel to melt water, malnutrition, and lacking food to maintain body temperature. On January 2nd, 1908,